Hey guys, in today's video I'm very excited to go over the instructive and absolutely chaotic ending of a tournament game I played against none other than my good friend and veteran expert Eric Goldstein. Now if you've seen the previous videos on my channel featuring Eric, including our time odds blitz battle last week, which by the way if you haven't seen you absolutely have to go watch, you know that Eric has a penchant for getting himself into very exciting situations, and this game was no exception. It was the third round of a tournament held a couple weekends ago in Wilmington, Delaware. And the game was pretty close the whole way, and at some point in this position, Eric took the initiative by bingoing with Sneakier for a whopping 98 points, taking a 79-point lead. That left me in a very tough spot, holding AHIRTTW with just 6 tiles in the bag. I knew that winning this game was going to be a long shot, but I had to at least give myself the best chance I could. The first thing I knew was that I absolutely would have to bingo to win this game. There was no chance I was making up a 79-point deficit this late in the game without bingoing. So that meant I had to leave my most important bingo lines open. And what are my most important bingo lines on this board? Certainly the top of the board, either potential 8-letter words with the W, the E, or maybe the L of welded, as well as the left of the board, namely 8-letter words through the N of nudge. I cannot afford to block any of these lines, because then Eric can block the other line, leave me without a possible place to bingo, and easily win the game. So I thought for a while and ended up making the play of white through the blank G of bandings for 20 points. I like this play because it leaves the top, middle, and top left of the board open and leaves a good leave of ART, leaving me a decent chance to draw a bingo on my next turn. The other thing I liked about this play was the endgame timing. It leaves 2 tiles in the bag. Why is that good? Well, the problem is if I leave more than 2 tiles in the bag, it's very easy for Eric to not empty the bag. And I feel like with a deficit as large as 79 points, my best path to victory is going to be making a play, hoping Eric empties the bag, and then I bingo out. The advantage of bingoing out is that Eric then doesn't get another turn to play, scoring more points and getting rid of tiles from his rack. If I leave just 2 tiles in the bag, then the only way Eric is going to be able to not empty is by playing a single tile. And if he chooses to do that, he's going to be hard-pressed to score a lot of points playing just 1 tile, and it also won't leave him as much flexibility to block the board. So that's the big reason why I made this play as opposed to something shorter that would leave 3 or even 4 tiles in the bag and allow Eric to make more of a substantial play while still not emptying. It's a very complicated play, and I'm not going to go further into detail on this play because I really want to discuss the next couple of turns, but all things considered, it seems like a pretty reasonable play. And it's worth mentioning, I had probably around 4 or 5 minutes on my clock before I made this play, and I burned almost all of my remaining time trying to get it right. I figured after this play, if I don't bingo, I'm going to lose, so I don't really need more time. And if I bingo, I'm going to play it instantly on my next turn, and I won't really need much time either. So I had exactly 7 seconds, I remember that clearly, on my clock after making this play, something to keep in mind going forward. And now Eric faces the most critical turn of the game, holding AEOOSS, and still maintaining a 59-point lead with now 2 tiles in the bag. And looking at the unseen pool from his perspective, those tiles, as you guys can see on the right, are AACEHMRTT. So I've accomplished my goal with playing white. I've put Eric into a very, very difficult situation because I have significant bingo threats both through the E of welded and through the N of nudge, and it's not going to be possible for Eric to simultaneously block everything. So he's got to figure out what on earth does he do here to at least maximize his chances of winning the game. Or maybe if he can guarantee himself a way to win this game, although that's going to be very difficult. So how on earth do you approach such a position if you're Eric? What I would recommend is splitting up your candidate plays into 2 categories. First, plays that do empty the bag, and second, plays that don't empty the bag. Plays that don't empty the bag are simply going to be plays that use a single tile, because like we discussed before, I left only 2 tiles in the bag with my previous play of white. Plays that do empty the bag for Eric, in other words, plays that use 2 or more tiles, are going to have outcomes that are much more straightforward to calculate. Why is that? Well, if Eric empties the bag here, it's not too hard to see that the game is simply going to come down to whether I bingo. If I bingo out, I'm going to win. If I don't bingo out, Eric is going to win. The thing is, Eric, even though he has 3 S's here, can't score all that many points. So if he empties the bag, any bingo for me that goes out, regardless of how much it scores, is going to be enough for me to win the game. I won't go through all of the possibilities in detail, but I'll leave you guys to check that that's the case. So that's all to say, if Eric empties the bag here, his best approach is very simply going to be making the play that blocks the most possible out bingos for me. In theory, that sounds pretty simple, but in practice, it's not, because Eric has to determine what are all my bingo threats. And with 2 tiles in the bag, that leaves 9 choose 2 or 36 possible 2-tile combinations that could still be in the bag, or in other words, 36 possible racks I could have that he has to sift through. And there are quite a substantial number of possible bingos I could have through either the N of Nudge or the letters in Welded. Let me list them all out. Through the N of Nudge, I'm threatening Earthman to the N, which would score over 90 points, as well as some lower scoring options like Merchant or Reactant. Through the E of Welded, I'm threatening Racemate, Attacher, Catheter, or Tracheae. If I have Trachea on my rack, that also plays to the L of Welded in the form of Tracheal. I actually don't have any threats from the W, which does help Eric a little bit. But even so, I have a lot of potential threats, and Eric is not going to be able to block all of these at the same time. It turns out that the play Eric has that empties the bag that simultaneously blocks as many of my threats as possible is to play the word season or seasons, it doesn't really matter, through the N of Nudge. And Eric saw and considered this play. This blocks, of course, all of my possible bingos through the N and bingos through the E that have to end in the E, such as Racemate. However, I still will win the game if I bingo out through the E with any of Attacher, Catheter, or Tracheae. How often does that happen? Well, let's go through each of those possibilities one by one. Attacher happens if Eric draws the E and the M out of the bag. There's only one E and one M, so the odds of that are only 1 out of 36. However, Catheter happens more often, because that's going to occur when Eric draws an A and an M. That happens 2 out of 36 because there are 2 A's. Finally, Tracheae is going to happen when Eric draws a T and an M. That, as well as an A and an M, is 2 out of 36. So adding all of those, 1 out of 36 plus 2 out of 36 plus 2 out of 36, Eric is losing 5 out of 36 times after season, so season wins 31 out of 36. This is the best Eric can do if he empties the bag. But what if Eric doesn't empty the bag here? Then things get a lot more complicated and difficult to calculate, because after I bingo, the game is not going to be over. There'll still be 1 tile in the bag, so after I bingo, I'll draw that tile, Eric is going to get another turn, and I'm going to get another turn. So you have multiple more plays you have to calculate. And that is actually what Eric decided to do in the game. In this position, Eric dropped his S with Jigs for 12 points, which is his highest scoring play that uses just 1 tile, and that's exactly why he did it. He figured after this, he's still going to be up 71 points, and most of the time, after I bingo, he would be able to outrun me in the endgame. This is a very sensible idea, and let's see what happened during the actual game. It turns out I did have a playable bingo, Racemate, through the E of Welded. I could have also played Macerate, but I decided on Racemate because I figured putting the R above the triple word score would yield less counterplay to Eric as opposed to the higher scoring M. Now remember guys, I only had 7 seconds left on my clock after white, so I didn't have time to calculate all the possibilities after Racemate and figure out which tile or tiles I would need to draw to have a winning endgame. But my instinct told me that Racemate would be better than Macerate, and I would need a good draw out of the bag. I got this down with about 2 or 3 seconds left on my clock, and I drew the H, leaving Eric with a rack of AEOOSST. Eric responded with Sweats for 22 points through the W of white. That brings Eric to 409, and I quickly found and played my highest scoring outplay, He, for 13 points to the E of Sneakier. I got this down with under a second left on my clock, narrowly avoiding a decisive 10-point overtime penalty. What ended up happening? Well, that brought me to 407, but I got 4 bonus points for Eric's unplayed O's, and I miraculously pulled out this game by a 2-point margin, 411 to 409. And I was pretty shocked, I'll be honest, to win this game. I certainly didn't like my chances after white, and even after Racemate, but I didn't actually realize how improbable it was. If we go back here to the position where I bingoed with Racemate, it turns out that I only win this game, guys, if I draw the H. I have to draw the H because otherwise Eric scores too many points in the endgame, and I am not able to score very much on my outplay. So I only had a 1 in 8 chance of winning the game with Racemate, which I was blissfully unaware of when I made the play. Like I said, I figured I would need some luck in the endgame. I didn't actually realize I had to draw the H to win, which is pretty wild. And in case you're wondering, Sweats is actually not Eric's best endgame play here. He has a play that does 1 point better, namely the tricky to see Sotols through the L of Welded for 23 points. Had Eric played this, I'll leave you guys to check the math, that following my play of he, as I did in the actual game, I would have won by a single point as opposed to the 2-point margin I actually won by in the real game. So it would have been a little better for Eric, but still not a win. Eric has no ability to win the game following my bingo of racemate, given my miraculous 1-in-8 pool of the H. So pretty crazy stuff in the end. Definitely a tough break for Eric and a very lucky break for me, especially under time pressure. So pretty cool ending, but let's go back and really try to unpack the question. If we go to the previous turn here, should Eric have played jigs? Was this correct, or should he have just played season? Which, by the way, had he played season, it turns out in this case he would have won because racemate or macerate no longer fit, as they would put a letter before season, which of course would make an invalid word. Or perhaps should Eric have made a different one-tile play entirely? Remember, it's critical, guys, to recall in Scrabble that just because a play does not work out, that does not mean it's not correct or better than another play that would have worked out. Now, let's unpack further, when does Eric's play of jigs lose? We just saw that it loses if I bingo with racemate and happen to draw the H. And where this gets very tricky to calculate, guys, is now you have to consider not only what are the 2 tiles that are in the bag when Eric makes his play, but also the order in which they're drawn. Which of those 2 tiles does Eric draw and which does he leave in the bag? That all matters. So we just saw one losing scenario. I have racemate, which means the H and one of the T's are in the bag. But after that, I also have to draw the T. So basically, the losing scenario is only if Eric draws the T and leaves the H in the bag. How often does that happen? That is 1 out of 36, because the odds that the H and the T collectively are in the bag are 2 in 36, so there being 2 T's, and the odds that Eric happens to draw the T are half of that, so it's 1 out of 36, that losing scenario. So at first, that might make you think, oh, well, that's only a 1 out of 36 loss. Season was a 5 out of 36 loss, so jigs is a better play. Well, not so fast, because there are other losing scenarios that Eric has to deal with here. Remember, I have many other possible bingos other than racemate. And there's also possibilities to the end that Eric has to now worry about, since unlike season, he didn't block any of those. So now what we have to do, guys, to calculate this is look at all of the possible bingos I could have and all of the possible endgame draws and figure out which of those are going to be wins for Eric. So it's quite a mess, but let's go through it. I won't go through every single resulting endgame in detail. Most of them come down to a difference of a couple of points. I'll leave that as a fun exercise to the very interested viewers, but I will go through all of the possible bingos I could have and list them as I keep talking on the table on the right, and we'll tally up all the situations where Eric loses and see what the final odds come out to. So, we already went over racemate. Let's look at the next bingo I could have through the E, namely catheter, which would score 80 points. This is going to happen if the A and the M are in the bag. And once again, it matters which of those 2 tiles Eric draws after jigs. If he draws the M, then he is going to be able to score enough points to still win in the endgame after my bingo of catheter. However, if he draws the lower scoring tile, similarly to what actually happened in the game, if he draws the A, I am going to score enough with the M and Eric is going to lose. So another losing condition for Eric is AM is in the bag and Eric draws the A. Once again, that is a 1 in 36 outcome. But we're not done there. In addition to catheter, I could hit attacher. Now, attacher scores even more than these other possibilities because it puts the C on the triple letter score. With E and M in the bag, if I happen to have attacher, it turns out that Eric loses whether he draws the E or the M, since I score so many points with my bingo. But the good news for Eric is this actually only happens 1 out of 36 at a time, not 2 out of 36 like the other bingos, because there's only 1 E and 1 M. So we add yet another 1 in 36 losing condition to our table on the right. Now, the last remaining bingo I could have through the E is tracheae. Should I bingo with tracheae, it's once again going to come down to what tile Eric draws out of the bag. Is it the M or is it the T? If he draws the M, then he's going to win pretty comfortably. If he draws the T, then it turns out he's actually going to lose by a single point in a sequence that's going to start with him playing sweats through the W as he did during the game. Once again, I won't show it on the board, but I'll leave you guys to check that tracheae, once again, will win if Eric draws the M, but it will lose if he draws the T. So tracheae, yet another 1 in 36 losing condition for Eric. That exhausts the bingos on the top of the board, but we're not done yet, guys, because I could still bingo through the N of nudge. Once again, I have 3 possible bingos through the N: Earthman, Merchant, and Reactant. Merchant and Reactant both score quite a bit less as they don't reach the triple, and it's not too hard to see that Eric will comfortably outrun either of those bingos regardless of what he draws out of the bag. So no losing conditions for Eric on either Merchant or Reactant. Earthman, however, is a different story. Earthman reaches the triple and scores a whopping 92 points for me. So surely that is going to be enough for me to win regardless of what I draw, right? Actually, no. Because here's the amazing thing, guys, and this is so cool, I'm actually going to show the variant on the board. If I bingo with Earthman and Eric left the T in the bag after jigs, then yes, I am going to win very comfortably. But it's not true that I'm going to win comfortably if Eric happened to leave the C in the bag. Because then, get a load of this. I have just a single C, and I have nowhere on this board to play it, guys. I am C stuck. So now, Eric can just take his sweet time playing off one tile at a time, and he is going to win big here. So, in the original position, Earthman actually only loses for Eric when he draws the C. So, what are the odds of this? Well, the odds of Earthman happening are once again 1 in 18. There are 2 T's and a C in the back, so that's 2 out of 36. But he only loses half of that, namely when he draws the C. So Earthman is just another 1 in 36 added to the list of Eric's losing conditions. So you add up all of the losing conditions we have on the screen, and you get that Eric is losing a total of 5 out of 36 times after jig, which amazingly is the same exact losing rate of the play of season we looked at earlier. Eric, in both of these cases, is losing 5 out of 36 or winning 31 out of 36. So by completely different means, season by blocking as many bingos as possible, and jigs by not blocking anything and trying to outrun by scoring as much as possible with a one-tile play, these plays by completely different methods, once again, win the exact same amount. And it's kind of unfortunate for Eric that he happened in this case to choose the one that lost, whereas the other one would have won had he played season. So a little bit of a bad break for Eric here. He was 31 out of 36 to win, which is somewhere around 85% after this play, but he didn't quite pull it out. Phew, that was a lot. But guess what, guys? We are not done yet, because that is just one of many one-tile plays Eric could make in this position. And this most certainly does not prove that jigs is optimal. Now you might be thinking, well, okay, what could be better than jigs? Like we said, jigs is Eric's highest scoring play that plays off a single tile, and if he's going to play off a single tile, surely he wants to score as much as he can to maximize his chances of beating me in the endgames. Because like I said, I didn't go through all of those endgames in detail, but several of them came down to just a couple points or even 1 point. But here's the thing. Eric might be better off, guys, if he decides to block some of my bingo threats while playing a single tile. He can do that with a play on the left obstructing the N of nudge, or a play on the top obstructing the E of welded. It seems like a tough call. After all, I have a fairly comparable number of bingos that play through the E and through the N. So it's going to come down to which line yields more bingos for me that actually are enough for me to win the game. And this is also not obvious at first, because while I have one super high scoring bingo through the N in Earthman, my other bingos through the N, Merchant and Reactant, don't score that well. None of my bingos through the E score a gigantic amount like Earthman, but they all score a pretty respectable amount, generally in the high 70s to low 80s. So should Eric block the line that yields one catastrophic bingo and 2 lower scoring bingos, or the line that yields a lot of middling bingos? It turns out that Eric is better off playing OE for 2 points here and blocking the E, because this is going to be able to outrun all of my bingos except Earthman in one specific situation. Let me show you the math on this. If Eric plays OE, now I'm down to 3 possible bingos. All of the ones through the N: Earthman, Reactant, and Merchant. Let's start with Earthman. If I hit Earthman for 92 in this position, it's pretty obvious that if I draw the T, namely if Eric draws the C after OE, I'm going to win easily. I'm going to be up over 30 points in the endgame and have several spots for my T. However, like we saw in a previous line, guys, if I draw the C, I am going to be in trouble. Because if that happens now, while Eric can't go out, I am C stuck, and he can just take his time, play off one tile at a time here with impunity, and he is going to make up this 31-point deficit and then some very easily. I won't even go through the math here. It's super easy to see. So, once again, after OE, Eric only loses if I play Earthman and draw the T, not the C, out of the bag. So, like it was with jigs, this is only a 1 in 36 probability outcome added to Eric's loss condition table after OE. Namely, once again, if CT are in the bag and Eric draws the C. How about the other words, namely reactant or merchant? When Eric played jigs, it was pretty obvious that he was going to outrun those, but now he has scored 10 fewer points by playing OE for 2 as opposed to jigs for 12. That's a pretty substantial difference, so is he still going to have enough to outrun merchant or reactant? Let's see. We'll start with merchant. If I hit merchant, Eric is going to have drawn either an A or a T out of the bag. If he draws the T, he's going to win easily. Since with this rack, he can play tassels for 25 points, clearing out nearly his entire rack, and he wins very comfortably. However, it's a bit closer if he draws the A, but he's still going to have enough. His best play here is the sneaky So, hooking merchants for 27, after which I get 6 for my T, and Eric holds on to win by 6, 404 to 398. So Eric has no losing conditions after OE. If I have merchant, he outruns me in the endgame regardless of what he draws out of the bag. Now there's only one more possibility to consider, me bingoing with reactant. If I bingo with reactant, that means the H and the M were in the bag, so Eric is going to draw one of these two tiles. And, as we'll see, both of those also lead to wins for Eric. If Eric draws the H after I bingo with a reactant, he wins easily. He has long plays like hassles through the L for over 30, or he can even play how on the right for 35, and it's very easy to see I'm not scoring nearly enough with my M, and Eric is going to win by double-digit points. If Eric draws the M, it's a little bit closer, but he will hold on. He can play messy and proofs to the Y on Irie for 22. I respond with my best scoring out of Ho for 14. And despite getting 6 bonus points from Eric's unplayed tiles, Eric will hold on and win by 2, 399 to 397. So, all that's to say, in the original position, if Eric plays OE for just 2 points, he has one and only one losing condition, namely, I bingo with Earthman and I draw the T. This only happens 1 out of 36, so that means OE is a play that wins 35 out of 36 times for Eric. So, when all is said and done, this turns out to be Eric's best play. I won't go through all the details, but I'll leave you guys to check that playing something like no for 2 on the left ends up way worse because now the vast majority of my bingos through the E are going to outrun Eric in the endgame. So, once again, Eric's best play, OE for 2, winning 35 out of 36. Eric's actual play of jigs, winning 31 out of 36. And finally, the blocking play of season, also winning 31 out of 36 times. That all being said, it's a really, really hard position. Eric also didn't have that much time, and I think it's a great illustration of why 2 in the bag pre-endgames are some of the most brutal and complicated to solve. You have to consider plays that empty the bag, you have to consider plays that don't, and especially the plays that don't empty the bag often lead to complicated endgame lines that can be decided by as little as a single point. So really interesting stuff. And yeah, that's going to be it for this one, guys. Shout out to Eric on a really fun and interesting game, as we always seem to have. Shout out to all of you guys for watching the video. Really appreciate your support. Let me know your thoughts on this position in the comments. Hope you enjoyed this video. Hope you learned something. Good luck in all those complicated Scrabble pre-endgames you may encounter. Thanks again for your support. Have a great rest of your day, and I'll see you all soon for the next video. Bye-bye.